Well, Dan, I keep hearing about ferrets in the news, and I think there's a lot of misleading information out there, and I thought we should take some time to clear it up. So first off, ferrets are not rodents. They're mustelids. That means they're related to weasels, otters, and other animals that are synonymous with mischievousness. Males are called hobs, females are jills. A spayed female is a sprite, and a neutered male is a gib. A vasectomized male is a goblet. Didn't know that.
Nope.
The name ferret comes from the Latin word ferretus. You know what ferretus means, Dan?
I don't.
It means little thief. This is appropriate. This is appropriate because ferrets are natural-born smugglers. They hoard random objects like keys, socks, and dignity. Ferrets were first domesticated initially used for hunting, but they later became useful in industrial applications as electricians. They were used they would tie wires to their backs and shoot them down tubes through airplanes to help wire airplanes up. Though later that was automated, and since the ferret really doesn't serve a purpose and really just shouldn't exist, I think we've all come to this agreement that we just don't need ferrets, and let's just leave it at that.
Welcome to Unqualified Advice, the show where we try to make sense of business, investing, and life with just enough experience to get ourselves in trouble.
I'm Sean, and he's Dan. We both started different careers, Dan in IT, climbing the ranks to Chief Technology Officer in New York, and me in manufacturing, managing production quality across 3 countries.
At some point, we both decided we didn't know enough. So we went back to school for our MBAs. Me at Columbia Business School, and Sean at the University of Houston downtown.
And after all that, we figured the best way to share what we've learned and what we're still figuring out is to start a podcast.
So, if you like deep dives into decision-making, business strategy, and the occasional half-baked investing theory,
or just enjoy listening to 2 guys challenge each other's ideas and occasionally admit when we're wrong,
you're in the right place. Welcome to Unqualified Advice. Welcome back to Unqualified Advice.
Welcome. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm good. We're getting a quick little breather. We had like an 85-degree day yesterday, full sun. I got a little bit of a sunburn on my neck, so I'm feeling like summer's around the corner. Right before, I think we're supposed to get snow on Easter, so, it's whiplash.
Yeah. To put a little bit of a timestamp on this for everybody listening later, we're recording on Sunday, April 13th around 9 a.m. We may say some stuff that may be invalidated by the time this comes out or by the time the conversation is over, the way things are going. So just a little context. We've had a little break in our heat here too. We were up in the high 80s and not quite so high 80s now.
Nice.
But
that's the right place. Not so high 80s. That's the right place.
Yeah.
Well, we had
Very
Liberation
much so.
Day, and then we had what? Unliberation Day? What do we call this?
Yeah. We've had Liberation
and then Liberation
Day,
of
and then
Apple Day?
I mean, a slow walking back of Liberation Day. I don't know. Like, I'm
so
still
we're not going hard into the paint.
I guess not. Well, everybody's still getting a tariff. I still say that even the base case right now is that everybody gets backed off to a 10% tariff is what I kind of feel like, which is still pretty hard into the paint, but not from the absolutely absurd, insane numbers that were initially published on Liberation Day.
We're going to bankrupt lots of SMBs and we're going to make unemployment spike. Like, that's how I felt about some of those initial numbers.
Yes. It's, damn it.
The 10-year dropped. And then, guess what?
And then, yeah, exactly.
What is it, like 4.88 or something now?
Yeah, precisely. So what we've basically created is in the minds of the world, the U.S. is a giant credit risk, essentially, with all of this is how this is. I'm reading the numbers and the data, right?
Hey, when you threat default.
When you threat default, essentially. And what was to me just so surprising about it is the numbers that were initially put out were just absolutely crippling. I don't understand. Like, his point of view is punch them in the face and then act big and get concessions. But so far he's acted big, and I'm sure there've been calls and he has heard some rumblings of things that he wants to have happen, but it also there's not been a lot publicly stated about what any of the concessions he's receiving are for stepping back from his initial move. And maybe the 90-day pause generally overall was to allow that to kind of to brew, and I think the reaction in the market falling, what was it, a total of 15% over a couple of days, the S&P dipped.
Yeah.
I think that initially I had to have seen that coming, right? And
yeah, I think so.
I don't
for
know.
As much as people make fun of him and his admin, like I don't, there's a level of intelligence that is in there. Like, that this is going to make the market drop. Like that doesn't take a very high bar of intelligence to figure out.
Yes, exactly. And then the back and forth wavering is truly, it makes it very hard to understand what's going to be going on and how to plan long term on any of this, right?
Well, I mean, whether there's a true grown up in the room or not, do they expect the market to tank as hard as it has?
I don't understand how they wouldn't understand the market was going to tank hard, and I'm honestly was surprised it didn't tank harder in some ways.
Yeah. There's still a faith of belief in here somewhere.
Yeah, there's still some people that were smart enough to say, "Oh, he's going to back off of this and pretty quick." That I think kind of held that.
I thought about buying some call options because I was like, "This, it's all volatility and Whiplash, right?" And he really loves making his friends money, so he's going to like throw in some phone calls and say like, put $8 million of options on the table. I'm going to spike the ball, and then everyone gets rich. And well, not everyone, the people that know those particular people that got the phone calls get rich, and then he can go back to negotiating. So it's just like take chips off the table as you go.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be a good time to, when you see a dip, 10%, put something on, and then let some volatility transpire, and then take some stuff off, right? Yeah. And do a lot of that this year if you want to follow along, play along at home, so to speak. You could also get yourself like an unusual whales account and try to see where the
volume is.
The volume is on the call options. It looked like there was just a huge bunch of Apple options bought, within 12 to 24 hours right before the announcement that they were basically going to be exempted from the tariffs. Just not like hundreds of millions of dollars, I believe, were made on that. Cool. So who knows what is definitely a big question in all of this, right? And is any of the stuff that's going on out here in the, how much of it is charade and masking for deeper corruption and problems of using these institutions as playthings to generate cash and revenue for the insiders?
Do you really think like that in talking about like starting point and destination A and B has anything to do with grift and corruption, or is it just that the journey from A to B is so rife with opportunity that it's like, well, until we get there, we're gonna play ball?
That's an interesting insight.
It's like, because there's a part of me that wants to be like, well, I mean, that's a good point. It's like, they want to go to the place they say they want to go, but along the way, let's get some big gulps.
I think it's definitely so rife with the opportunity, as you say, like, because before we go into the path, let's talk about where is it A to B that we think that they want to go, Dan. So we're currently in a system of Bretton, post Bretton Woods, really.
Neoliberal, because
that Bretton Woods was really kind of dissolved with the gold standard and by Nixon's. But we've kind of came into a financialized version of the Bretton Woods system.
Agreed. Yeah, I think fundamentally it's the same thing. It's just a little tweak.
Yeah, where instead of being backed by gold, it's backed by the USD being the world's reserve currency,
which in some ways puts even a steeper, or like a more weight on the basis of Bretton Woods, which is we will keep trade lanes open, and if anyone shuts them, we will use our massive firepower against them.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so I think a lot of the intent and spirit of Bretton Woods being maintained, but with a different financialized system where it allows more bubbles to kind of happen in certain ways, and allows more hypothecation of assets where you turn you make this piece of paper suddenly meaningful by saying, oh, this represents 1/10 of a share of that person's mortgage, and we're going to bundle this with other sets of people's mortgages and sell them off as a bond.
So you're using the picture I have in my mind right now is Richard Thaler at the craps table or whatever in The Big Short.
Yeah,
with Selena
exactly.
Gomez. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So you had, that was basically allowed to develop into where we are today. So that's where we are. So that's then where is B? Where's point B that we want to go? Do you see it that they've, from what you understand?
Well, thank you for doing that, because it's kind of like my previous statement blows up in my face a little bit. I don't know that the B is completely clear to me. If I had to guess what's going on inside that brain, he wants power and glory for himself and America. Mm-hmm. But the ways and means are not necessarily compatible with what we have to do in order to maintain the Bretton Woods system, which is a lot of global financial aid, bringing people to our way of thought and capitalism and property rights and human rights and the different things that we very imperfectly try to keep hold of. Mm-hmm. And for him, it's too much giving. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think the giving is what makes it.
I think the giving
there's a fundamental break for me, but
I think the giving is what allows it to evolve effectively over time.
Agreed. Well said. Yes, because it's not like as soon as I start, I get my result. You start, and it takes decades. And we have built this thing, and now someone on our team is trying to sledgehammer it.
Yes, very much. I've been trying to figure out what that point B is for myself. Part of it is we want to bring back manufacturing to America. Manufacturing in America has. Wish I'd pulled up this chart.
It's been plummeting since the 70s, and NAFTA was released, and people blame NAFTA for gutting out manufacturing, but the slope didn't change. It didn't accelerate.
No. So let's talk about that setup. So manufacturing in America peaked in around 1945, and since 1950, it's been on a pretty steady decline. There's a point in time where NAFTA exists. There's a point in time where China enters the WTO, and but the slope of the line is pretty consistent.
The whole time,
45-degree angle down.
Yes.
You know why? What was unique about the world's manufacturing base in 1945?
It was here.
There was none except for the United States, because the rest of them had been bombed to shit in World War II. Dresden was gone. Japan was gone. There was nowhere else to manufacture these goods, so they were all naturally going to come from here. There was no choice. Then people started to relocalize and build that manufacturing base up globally. And of course, it's going to come back down to a level. And arguably, you could say perhaps there are some things that we could make here and should make here that we don't.
Yes. But that's a strategic decision rather than some sort of blanket decision, which is we're dealing in blankets right now.
Exactly. So I am so fed up with this we have this divine right to have the world's manufacturing here, because also if you want to start making socks, then what are we going to stop making? What are we going to give up in our economy? That's high margin, high value add that we will have to give up in order to have somebody allocated to make socks for us all day.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Now,
it's at 4% unemployment, so it's not like we got extra people, and you're trying to kill immigration, so we definitely don't have extra people.
I mean, in my head, I think that some of the population that is for this says, oh, well, there's like this secret unemployed army over here that's all of a sudden going to want to come back and work in these sock factories. But I don't.
I mean,
I just
maybe
don't
after a
personally
year of
see it.
Ozempic or something, right? Like, I mean, so like when you look at the disability numbers on the American populace, and like I don't know, I'm not close enough to this data, but like I can't help but to think a lot of this is, let's just put it under the umbrella term metabolic syndrome. And is it real there are real disabilities and people need disability, and then there's another set of people that I feel like it's not fair to demonize any of this, but like is there an amount of people that, oh, okay, this is where this is coming from. Did you see I believe this is released from China, like whether it's CCP directly or sort of like indirectly, propaganda machine, whatever. There was an AI generated little video, and it's funny.
I did.
Like
Of
300
all
pound
the
men putting together Teslas and pulling cheeseburgers out from under the Teslas and eating them while holding a drill, and like
yes,
they're all sweaty and working too
that
hard.
was dark. That was dark,
Very
and funny.
dark and funny. But there's some truth to that in our labor force, right? And so like when I think about this, this dark horse of unemployed blob that you kind of mentioned, like people I have no idea, but I'm like, we do have more people that could be in the workforce, but like are we even fit to work? Like we have like bigger, like again, this goes back to like, is tariff these blanket tariffs, did they fix anything, or did like we need to do a little soul searching and ask ourselves, like, it's like someone coming to me for advice, and it's like, let's try to get to some fundamental questions.
So here's what here's where I come down on this is I understand, again, so I'm trying to understand what their end viewpoint is, right? So clearly, as we delineated, I don't think that they really want sock factories back. I don't think that's what they want. I think, but his approach is to come out really big first, and with something else in mind that you really want, and exactly. And so we don't understand what it is he is looking for, I think.
But then how, on the other side of the table, how do you even know where to give?
You don't. I don't think this is an effective strategy particularly. So that's what I was going to say is like, I think we should be saying, okay, we have a problem where there is a shipyard in China that has made more ships last year than the United States has produced since 1945, since the end of World War II. That's a problem.
Fact.
Yes, that is a fact. So maybe we need to look at saying, how do we strategically bring, shipbuilding back to the United States in a meaningful way? How do we, what are the and that could be a higher value add product too. Like
very much,
these don't have to be low tech things. They can be higher tech things and done in higher tech ways.
We can build the best one, right? Like maybe we'll still not build many, but we will be building the best ones. Like this keeps coming back for me. I'm like, this is America.
I also think what's important though is, and let's talk about some other aspects of this, is the ability to build them in somewhat mass too, right? It's not just building a few Ferraris. We also want to be building the, I don't know,
F-150. It's the F-150.
Yeah. We want to be building the F-150. That's a
but
good,
it's got some options,
example,
man. Like we've got like a theater set screen in front of the driver in some of them, while others it's just like almost a stick shift. Like we're doing it all, but the chassis, we got it.
Because like a big part of what has happened the last couple of weeks, kind of, I think, went under the radar was his reinforcement and like doubling down on some of the Jones Act principles, right?
Doubling down on Jones Act, when I want to.
Where if you're coming and dropping off goods at the U.S. port in a Chinese-made ship, you're going to have to pay an extra $1.5 million every time that ship drops off and face X, Y, and Z tariffs, and that by X year you have to have. I think was it American crude vessels or face a fine. He's basically trying to build up a merchant marine fleet, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It feels like he's trying to build up a merchant marine fleet, which is useful during when?
Kinetic warfare.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's so if I'm taking like that little lesser known thing and thinking about all these other things he's trying to do and reshaping the way we're interacting with these countries, I guess my worry is B ultimately kinetic warfare? Is that what B is that they're trying to prepare people for?
I think there's an argument. The data's murky. But murky enough, I think there's people that have used the data to try to tell a particular story. And that story is tariffs and economic warfare lead to kinetic warfare. So that's scary. But at the same time, I think there is some of the sanity in all of this is the fact that should something happen where we have to fight, we are not in any way prepared to do that. Because most of that is going to be using our geography to have an industrial base to fight the war. And it can't just be F-35s. So as much as that is uncomfortable and like a truth that I think that we all need to like reckon with of, if we are going to maintain any semblance of the Bretton Woods system and keep open trade open, we also need to back that with smart firepower that is useful in today's world. And I think we are way behind the times when, the headline number is the F-35 is built in all 50 states because you have to appease Congress. And then it's just this messy plane that like does no thing well, but is one plane that services all three branches of the main military, right? It's like going back to like blankets versus strategy and being tactical. Like these are the kinds of, again, like we just need to go a couple layers deep. And I think we've got like some really, kind of easy questions to answer on how to be more effective with the money that we spend.
We have a friend who knows a lot about the F-35 that I don't think we could ever get to say anything about the F-35, but I think he listens. If you ever want to come on, you know who you are. Let us know.
That'd be awesome. Or just like we could just talk and not record.
Yeah, I'd be open to that. I'd be open to that. It's such a messy system we've built, because we're trying to constantly rule by committee on certain aspects, which I also understand why people say, "Hey, a stronger central authority might be more effective," and I do understand that notion too, right? I think that mess that we've built leads to some of this that we're seeing now.
Yeah, 100%. So then the other thing that gives, like, the other tack on this that gives me comfort, because we've done it over and over and over and over again as a country and society, is we are late to the ball game. We see stuff coming and we're all like, well, we're so like protected over here, we don't really have to deal with it, and like, Europe can be Europe, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then things get bad and we're like, well, I guess we got to go clean up everyone else's mess, and we whip this machine into action and we go. And that's messy and expensive, but since we're the ones that often sweep the floor, it puts us in a different position, doesn't it?
Yes, I suppose.
But is that the future? Like, just because it's happened in the past, like,
I was going to say it's happened. It's happened twice in the past, right? And then there's been other times when it hasn't happened, or where I would say we've gone in to try to sweep the floor when it wasn't needed. I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but also I don't think the world wants us to come in and be that, by and large, right? There was a time when I think it might have been.
Okay, that I think feeds right into this tussle that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
If everyone wants to pay $75 for their socks because the trade lanes aren't opened anymore, and there are actual real pirates, and half of the container ships get sunk on their destination, and there's no manufacturing base at home to make socks, if that's the future you want, cool.
It's not really a future I want, though. You do
Me
make
neither,
me wonder: are there any publicly traded deep sea recovery companies
Are there any publicly traded pirates?
No, yeah, pirates. I mean, I think at a time in history there probably were. You could, fund privateer missions, right?
Yeah,
probably
for sure. Yeah.
So
I'm sure there are some people that have like at least pen names that are famous, well-read people who like just sat in their little mercantile brownstone in Amsterdam and made crap tons of money funding pirates. I bet
sure
there's that person somewhere.
I'm sure. Yeah. There has to be. I struggle with it because it's like, what is our duty here to, enforce the system, but also one thing I think we have to honestly look at is how our financialized system puts us at risk in the future, right? We've talked on here before about the way it's currently structured. A lot of our big institutional programs might run out of money due to changing demographics, essentially declining growth rate. Our system's not necessarily designed to handle certain population
designed
growth
to handle
below a certain level. Yeah. So we do need to have some structural changes, and I think some of those are within this vision that the current leadership has. But I think it's in a very unusual. I don't know. I don't think it's probably in the way either you or I would picture. But I think that there is a little bit of undercurrent, a little bit of that understanding of things. There is a change that's needed. And I think we all need to come around to that in some way. And this probably isn't the right tact and way to approach some of those necessary changes. But we haven't been addressing it yet.
Another question for you. So if this is the system that we think is best for humanity, like it raises the floor on humanity worldwide, which is something I believe. Mm-hmm. But people, the broader thought or narrative is that people don't want America acting as if as though it has, and therefore embedded in that statement, whether known or not known, is we no longer maintain open trade. And therefore poverty goes up and the rest of it, if we're holding to my theory. Is it so much that things need to change, or there just needs to be enough pain felt worldwide such that they realize what this system is and what they gain out of it, even if knowing what they gain is still nebulous, but it is appreciated rather than not appreciated, which I think is where we've been since probably the invasion of Iraq. I think that's kind of the impetus point for a lot of this sort of distrust and dismay with our actions in the world.
Mm-hmm. Could you argue it goes back even to Vietnam?
I think you could make that argument. And it would be a cogent, sound argument, but I feel like it's more modern than that.
Because I wonder how much some of this is just cyclical, right? Of like, we go through these. Well, no.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to mess this up. I just heard. Sorry, I just created another edit point for you.
The silence is crazy.
There's something like, as soon as China got the nuke, we went to Vietnam the year later. And as soon as
Iran
still doesn't have the nuke.
No, you're right.
Pakistan? There were 3 examples of like that country got the nuke, and then that geopolitical arena was therefore so drastically changed that it caused kinetic warfare. The nuke didn't cause the warfare. The country that got the nuke wasn't involved in the war directly, but it changed the balance of power such that war erupted.
There was like a proxy fight that happened because of it, essentially.
Yeah.
Was some of that we wanted to have troops in the area?
Closer.
Mm-hmm. And have an excuse for setting up a base somewhere nearby.
Or setting up some tacticals nearby.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm afraid that's definitely part of it, right?
Yeah. That's a not surprising correlation, I would say. But
Yeah, I'll have to go find it. I heard it from Peter Thiel. He
Okay.
Pretty eloquently laid it out, and I was like, it's another one of those like, I hear you. You just displayed the data to me. I think the argument for correlation is still up for grabs, but it is very worth knowing, right?
Yes.
when trying to like prognosticate on the future, which is what he was doing. So
yeah, exactly. It's one of those.
Man is really good at it. So
it's one of those. Let's pay attention to these past trends that might not be proven yet, but that do seem to at least somewhat exist, right? Or
or things to be mindful of. Like, I think it's a worthy a worthy effort to try to keep the nuke out of Iran, because then the balance of power there changes drastically, right? How you come to the negotiating table changes drastically there. And I heard, again, I don't remember where I heard this argument, but it was not illuminated to me until after I heard it, of our invasion of Iraq was like one of the biggest blunders, because Iraq was essentially holding Iran back and keeping them busy and draining the treasury and the coffers and the army and so on and so forth. They would conflict with each other. But as soon as we went in, it was a power vacuum, and it actually gave Iran more power, which is another interesting lens with which to look through when trying to like map out some of these actions. So, when you think about the tariffs and like trying to have these countries come and kiss the ring of the president and all these different things that are going on, I'm running out of words to say. I'm continually fascinated.
Well, yes,
if not frustrated.
So also what's fascinating to me about this is we're he's throwing a grenade out there in the room, and we really don't know how things are going to land. Like, all of a sudden, for the first time in forever, South Korea, China, and Japan started working on some bilateral negotiations around trade.
I think that's Chinese propaganda.
You think that's Chinese propaganda? Okay,
I do.
That's fair. That's fair. But the idea is out there now,
yes,
right?
Agreed on that. And the way that people
so here's what I'm saying
to that
is
trough.
There are going to be situations where now there might be some, new interesting alliances and dynamics of power formed in terms of global trade. There will be unintended consequences that we won't know until another 5 or 10 years, I'm sure, as it takes a long time to restructure certain parts of the supply chain. Certain things can be moved somewhat quickly, but they're few and far between. I think most of our complex items, the supply chains are years to remake in general.
Yeah, I saw, again, I'm kind of like repeating some things that I have not fully investigated, but something like the F-150 transmission, the best-selling car in America, the transmission crosses the border like 5 times or something.
Yeah.
Before it gets inserted into the truck.
I believe that.
It's like tariffs are non-linear, right? They are exponential at that rate.
Yeah, because it's going to get applied. Doot. So I saw this really interesting chart. It was from Saturini in one of his pieces, showing basically the compound effect of tariffs. So on a raw material, if you have a 10% tariff, the compound effect is basically 1-to-1. It's about 10%. No, I'm sorry. You get about a 12% tariff. So it's like what would that be, a 1.2x modifier. But on something like an automobile, it's about a 2.5x modifier or 2.3x modifier, and on a smartphone, it's like 2.9x, somewhere around that. Because
just on the base steel.
Well, just like on a 10% tariff on like flat across the board 10% tariff, and like how that then gets like because of the complexity and like things moving across borders and where all the components come from, like you end up getting the more complex the item, the more that basically compound modifier builds up, right?
Yeah. Once you start thinking about it, especially if like, there was some
again YouTube is why, I was saying earlier, it doesn't make sense to have these just massive across the board, overarching, like we're gonna just punch everybody in the mouth because you're all you're gonna end up doing is just grinding us into a recession, in short order, like within 9 months.
Well, and the other trick, The other thing that I think about, I'm not stating this as a position, but it's
which is why I don't think it's going to happen.
well, yeah, agreed. Yeah,
Like, I think a lot of this is still to be backed off of. I still think
100% out of the deal. It's like, do you want to move into your comparison table?
yes. Yeah, so a while back we were talking about the idea that the world needs more Lao Tzu and a little bit less Sun Tzu. So Lao Tzu, actually Lao Tzu, wrote the Tao Te Ching, and Sun Tzu, the Art of War. And as I was kind of to make a comparison of the two, I'm like, what fits interestingly into this is the art of the deal. So let me pull up my comparison table. So this is one on strategy, basically how they would approach, tactical situations. And I made one for then governance as well. So when it comes to strategy, Sun Tzu would argue to be calculated and subtle. Trump, the art of the deal, would argue to be bold and aggressive. And Lao Tzu would say, avoid strategy, follow the Tao. So one thing that Lao Tzu speaks a lot about in the Tao Te Ching is called Wu Wei, basically the way of the water, to take non-action and go with the flow, for, I think, a way to think about it very succinctly. So, which you could argue that perhaps that is pacifist, or maybe too passive, and if you need to determine an outcome, and which in some ways you may need to, that might not be appropriate, but that's I don't know where I fall in the three of those.
That I think is where the interesting discussion is. It's not about assigning yourself to one or versus another. Mm-hmm. It's knowing when to employ which school of thought. Like I guess my analogy is like they're all imperfect. So like Douglas MacArthur and George Patton. These are two like highly decorated and celebrated generals from World War II, but they were also hard to work with, hothead people who just completely bulldozed their way through things, right? And were not necessarily friendly to the bureaucracy that is the United States Army, or highly respectful of generals above them. There are such things as wartime generals or wartime CEOs, and you need them in those times. And then there are peacetime generals and peacetime CEOs, and I think you need them in the right time. So would it also be that, I mean, in this scenario, I would just be choosing from, the Sun Tzu versus Lao Tzu sort of model. Mm-hmm. But I think there's times to employ one versus the other based on the times. No,
I think that's absolutely true. And I think looking like here at like the Trump's, kind of approach, it's more of there's tactical advantage to probably doing that in certain, not even, it's like less than times. It's like in certain instances. It's like, it's a tool in the toolkit to bring out when you need it, but it's not like necessarily a peacetime or wartime. It's like I don't know.
I think it's media time.
Yeah. Just the information time.
The thing that did not exist during Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu's time was a vibrant set of mass media and social media. And now you have that. And if you look at, it's like one here for power under Trump is control the narrative. Now, I feel like controlling the narrative under a strictly adhered to and controlled dynasty is like completely possible from the top. But in our society, controlling the narrative is more of a nebulous sort of, it's a different kind of exercise, but it's a very powerful one. If you
it could also, it could also be, authoritarian-esque, right? Like controlling the narrative, I think.
Well, now that he's in a particular seat of power.
Yes, that's true. And
but before that, he was still for this and would do it. He would just be on TV all the time and say his own thing. And then we've seen it.
You're
for
right.
years now. People should just subscribe to his narrative.
This is through the lens of not of governance, but of like of strategically approaching situations. Is this this analysis of factors? So strategy, we have Sun Tzu, calculated and subtle; Trump, bold and aggressive; Lao Tzu, avoid strategy, follow the Tao. Speech, reserved for Sun Tzu; Trump, brash in public. That makes perfect sense. Lao Tzu, silent and minimal. Power. Sun Tzu says control the battlefield. Trump says control the narrative. Lao Tzu says let go of control. When it comes to ego, Sun Tzu says it's a useful tool. Trump says it's the centerpiece. Lao Tzu says it's an obstacle to peace. When it comes to action, Sun Tzu says be precise and timely. Trump says be assertive and opportunistic. That feels right compared to what we're seeing right now. And Lao Tzu says non-action, or as I've mentioned before, the Wu Wei, the way of the water. When it comes to winning, Sun Tzu says the key is to outmaneuver the enemy. Trump says win big, win publicly. And Lao Tzu, the concept of winning dissolves. Just to give everybody listening a quick overview of the aspects
Table.
how this table is laid out and how these different minds are thinking about their strategic approach to, again, like an objective, right? Is how I think the high points of what these philosophies would say. Yeah. I think the other one that stands out for me under the Trump side is the under action, be assertive and opportunistic. I wonder, like, being opportunistic, I wonder, was there anything about the particular timing that Trump's done any of this, or is it just that it's the opportunity just because it's the first start of his term here?
Yeah, I mean, when the voting records move as hard as they did, the narrative was that there was a mandate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically every single demographic moved toward him. So, yeah, was it the fact that he just came in swinging, or like that was the opportunistic part? Like, you don't, mandate or not, you don't know how long they last.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what we're going to be seeing 24 months from now.
Yeah, totally. Agreed. Well, midterms are in what? It's 18 months or something?
Exactly.
It can change the total balance right there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how perhaps a more active Congress will change the way some of these things are being handled at the moment. Because right now they're pretty much just sitting around, it feels like.
How is that different than the last decade?
Pretty much just sitting around and collecting money from call options.
They're just on their Robinhood accounts while doing hearings.
It's just insider trading left and right across the board.
Don't call us jaded.
No, we're just pragmatic. we've seen the data. I've seen enough of the data to know it's like it's a significant percentage. I don't have. It's not everybody, I'm sure, but there's enough of it going on. Yeah.
Although maybe that's the narrative that should be controlled. We should be celebrating the ones that we know are not participating, because they have almost every right to. Obviously, the precedent has been set. There is no punishment for this, and they're leaving millions and millions of dollars on the table by not participating, and they're doing it out of ethics and concern for their roles of leading the public. Mm-hmm. We should be celebrating those people, but they never get any airtime. Pelosi just gets more airtime.
That's true, because people are interested in what the bad actor's up to.
Everything is the Hunger Games.
Yeah. It's all entertainment. So the other comparison I put together, let's hop over to that here, is on then what kind of they would be in terms of how they would approach governance. So this is a different order, but in terms of the role of a leader, Lao Tzu, I would say, be passive, subtle, behind the scenes. Sun Tzu from The Art of War would say be a strategist and moral disciplinarian. And Trump would say be the decider in chief and a showman. In an ideal society, Lao Tzu would say the leader is peaceful, mindful, in harmony with nature. Sun Tzu would say they should be ordered, secure, united through leadership. And Trump would say prosperous, aggressive, and winning. Use of power. Lao Tzu would avoid it. It's dangerous. Sun Tzu would say power must be tempered and strategic, the use of it. And Trump, of course, would say power should be seen and flexed. When it comes to public opinion, Lao Tzu doesn't seek it. Sun Tzu would keep it in mind for morale, and Trump would be obsessive over it and leverage it. When it comes to laws and control, Lao Tzu, minimal laws, light touch. Sun Tzu, clear rules, well enforced. Trump, strong top-down control and negotiation. When it comes to leadership style, Lao Tzu would be a servant who doesn't impose. Sun Tzu, a commander with respect. And Trump, a boss who dominates the room.
I think there's an interesting question around game theory here, too. Because if you're leading a government and your leadership style is servant who doesn't impose, I would not bet on your longevity.
I would not either. Well, and you have to remember Lao Tzu was never... was he actually the leader? He was like the guy who advised the leader, like the several rulers, if I remember correctly. I'm going to probably come back and edit this section out because I'm sure I'm brutally wrong. But he was
antithesis to Machiavelli.
Something like that. And I don't want to screw it up. I'm not gonna go into something I don't know. I remember I read like a history of the Tao Te Ching and the Tao Te Ching, and it was interesting how he came to kind of those views. It was through basically sitting on a lot of courts and just sitting on the side and writing down what happened through the different leaders tried and failed at, and developed this philosophy eventually.
Does that so that also makes you wonder about the leader with which he witnessed all of this happen, right? If you're writing things down in order to try to understand and improve the outcomes of the people who come and implore the leader, but your sample size of leader is 1 or 2, that's an interesting thing to keep in mind when studying him.
Well, or also what were the times that he was witnessing, right? Because it could have been a time of was there famine? Was there war? What were the
Peace.
other context around it? I'm going to have to reread that little, it was only a 150-page book.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting analysis, kind of comparing some different famous Eastern minds with what we're currently seeing here today. And because, they're kind of 3 different poles in a way, I'd say. And I think there's, probably 1,000 more different constellations of people you could map out in a similar way and have different results too. It's not that there is a set, this is one way or this is another that should be followed. It's a constantly changing network of minds at the top.
Yes. Yeah. The 3-body problem. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together. This was I actually really enjoyed looking at those tables. That's
good.
Yeah.
Kind of just an interesting little, I don't know exactly what use that is, other than it tickled my fancy. What else is going on in the world this week, Dan? Is there anything else we want to, or is there anything else you want to say about tariffs and the current state of the world before we move on?
There's an interesting thing going on in the e-commerce world of Mark Cuban is now paying attention to us and the plight of the shenanigans that the Chinese sellers are able to get away with, whereas the American sellers very much cannot do any of the things that the Chinese sellers do, which is it just makes the opportunity field completely unlevel, right? So I don't know. I think it's interesting. When I think about some of the, I've gone back and listened to Mark Andreessen and Peter Thiel, like a whole bunch of people who like went in a particular direction, and I really wish I could like hear from any of them right now because it seems like they've all gone dark since Liberation Day.
Doesn't it?
Interesting.
Doesn't it feel that way?
Interesting.
And Andreessen said some stuff the other day. He had a thread up there. That
okay, I'm gonna go find it.
I'll find it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Where was I? Anyway, like
everybody's gone silent since Liberation Day, and Mark Cuban is not.
One of the things I remember Andreessen saying was like, we tried to get meetings with Biden, and Biden just was like uninterested in talking to anybody. And I think there's an argument to be made where like his people were protecting from a lot of public. Like, there wasn't a lot of Biden left, so there wasn't a whole lot of time to be meeting with people or something along those lines. So was it a shunning of the industry, or was it just like protecting the president? All of that doesn't matter. What matters is people weren't getting meetings with Biden, and therefore certain things within government you couldn't project your worries, ambitions, and so forth. There was no court.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have a much more open court. It's probably shut off to a particular side, the deeper in the paint other side, but it does seem like a court that is more actively listening than the previous court. Let's just again leave it there. I'm trying not to get too political. I'm trying to observe. And now, because there seems to be, because the vibe shift or whatever you want to call it, right? There's been this circle of e-commerce people that in particular I follow on Twitter, and they've been trying to make the case. And it's finally gaining a little bit of momentum to level the playing field a little bit in terms of the marketplace that is Amazon. And personally, for someone who, and I have not been able to find a way to like trust Andy Jassy, and this move of like courting China direct and courting Chinese sellers and so forth, despite all the black hat tactics and all the skirting of taxes and rules and tariffs and so on, Amazon has dug their heels in terms of trying to court this side of the marketplace to come deeper into their system and to be more advantaged. I think that this is my tinfoil hat thing. I think that is, some high up executive trying to squeeze out more pennies to the bottom line, and that working. Mm-hmm. You get the nod. Whereas I think Jeff Bezos was a systems thinker and knew how to use, measure, and court risk in the right ways. And I think if he were still in charge today, we would see movement on this already because he is a systems thinker, basically. I think his silence is deafening right now.
I was thinking about that today. Like he also like had a vision in the in a way that like, if I just get people to start buying these things on Amazon, then they'll start looking for other things on Amazon. Then whenever time they want something, they're like, let me see if I can find it on Amazon. Well, you know what? If we can put it there, they'll buy it there. Like we've talked about this, like, oh, I bought a new wok. Well, where'd you get that? Amazon. Like, why? It used to be a bookstore. Now it's an everything store, right?
Yeah.
So, and I can get it within a day. I don't usually need something much quicker than a day or two, generally speaking, unless it's groceries,
food.
Yeah. So they end up just dominating this space that then, now they're trying to, okay, well, how do we further optimize that? Well, we, try to get our cogs down and get the most high margin stuff, the best margins we can. But it seems to lack the vision of, okay, well, I don't like, what vision is it lacking, Sean? Like in these current times, it feels like they could be running a campaign of, are you an American-based seller? Are you trying to promote that these
make
are
it much
somehow
more clear who you're buying from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I was wondering, in some situation, like if you're a seller who's primarily importing things and just selling, and not just, but then selling them, through different channels, Amazon being one of them, to at least be able to say you're an American-based seller would be an advantage. And then, you'd probably have to also delineate then clearly where the products are originally manufactured as well. I'm sure they already are. You have to probably put a country of origin labeling on everything.
We do.
How that's promoted on the web page, I'm not 100% positive. I don't feel like I see it predominantly.
Then
So
you haven't looked. It's definitely there, but like I'm someone who goes and fine tooth combs my own listing, so like I know where all the stuff is.
yeah. Well, so that's a good comparison. Like somebody who's just buying stuff, like I'm not necessarily looking for it, and it doesn't catch my eye, right? They don't put it in a way that in a place that is it's probably visible.
Also, as someone who writes these things, people don't read. Like, not as someone who writes these things. As someone who's done customer service for these listings, it's abundantly clear people don't read a goddamn word. So people don't try. That's it. Like that's my jaded, here I am to tell you what reality is. The reality is that there's a $40 American-made American flag for sale on Amazon, and they sell about $2,000 a month worth of product. And there's a Chinese-made American flag for $20, and they sell over $20,000 of product every month. Revealed preferences.
What about a Mexican-made Chinese flag for $30?
I think we should just have a parody Amazon store, like a real Amazon store, and we sell real things, but it's like a parody of the marketplace somehow. I think that could be a fun project. Everyone's boycotting Amazon, and our store just keeps climbing.
How much working capital would that take to get started up? That's the question.
Yeah. Now with tariffs, it's more. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel so bad for everybody whose working capital just basically doubled while on the water, or potentially.
Yeah.
Like, how the hell does anybody get through that situation?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff go to landfill because there just won't be cash. And then the other thing is between the Houthis and the tariffs, just millions and millions and millions of gallons of extra diesel fuel will be burnt. Because a ship will go from China to Vietnam and then America to do some reclassification. And that'll add 30 days of travel and a whole bunch of carbon footprint. And all the boats that are going from China to Europe and serving the European market are all going around the Horn of Africa now.
I was reading this little blog from a person that works in plumbing parts and sources toilets, and so they used to source toilets directly from China. Now they're starting to source toilets from I think Vietnam or India, but the parts are all now being made in China, but being sent individually to Vietnam, where they're then being assembled. So they've taken about 10% of the total value add out of China, left 90% of it there, saved 60% on the tariffs, much more on the tariffs,
and a significant portion of those Vietnamese factories are Chinese owned.
And yes,
the money's still flowing. Yep.
Yes, also true, because China has quite to, I don't know, in their foresight or not, I suppose their foresight, built up an industrial base by investing in factories outside of just their own geography, right? They have
Apple.
Yeah, Apple too.
I know, not just the company. I think in terms of who helped make China what China is today. I think fundamentally you kind of have to look at the history of Tim Cook. I think there's a lot of credit to give that man of what China is today.
Interesting.
Maybe more than Xi.
Wow.
Maybe that's but I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not saying like I stamp my word on that statement, but I think that's that is a provocative statement that is interesting to think about.
Okay, I'll think about that some this week. That's interesting. Any good books on that topic?
No, just Stratechery. Ben Thompson, probably.
Okay, fair enough. Ben's good. I like his writing. Yeah, so basically we've not changed anything other than, as you've pointed out, added some diesel into the process. We've added some diesel into the process, increased prices, and not fundamentally changed a ding-dang thing. It's all the same.
That's really depressing. What do you think?
Yeah. So which is to say that, if you perceive that there's a problem in our global supply chains, it's pervasive. And perhaps if you do want to drive that, more manufacturing back to America, it is going to have to be tariffs, across the board, where you can't, just relocate parts of the supply chain. But also, I don't think that makes sense to do on everything, as we've said. So
I think I got this. I'm stealing this idea, and I think I got it from Noah Smith, who I've mentioned on the podcast before. He was saying, like, one of the strong points of NAFTA, or the renegotiated NAFTA that I don't remember the acronym for.
USMC.
If you were to make that bigger, think of it more like an economic NATO, rather. NATO is militaristic, but like an economic NATO. Instead of bringing all the manufacturing back to the U.S. under the confines or labeling of national security, right? Like, do we need socks? No. But do soldiers need socks? We do. So we need to make socks. Goes the line of thinking, right? Why not try to have like a special economic zone of knowing that your complete wartime supply chain is within your
that zone,
circle and balance of power? And I thought that's the right, I think, for now, the way I'm thinking is like, that's the right globalized position for an American-led future.
So what does that then look like to you? Or do you know?
I don't completely know, but let's just, like, are drones do we not have the labor force for drone manufacturing or something, right? Or like, we just need so many drones that we need to distribute this supply chain out. Like, tariffs would destroy the ability to do this, right? But like, can we build drones? And I don't even know who the right can we make drones in Mexico and Paraguay and Canada and the north of the UK and the list goes on. Whereas, like, if you had to turn up the volume dial on these things, again, mostly a national security viewpoint here, would that be the right way to go?
Well, so if you want to make a drone here, here's an interesting story from back in 2017. Craftsman had offshored their production of a lot of their tools, and they tried to reestablish an American manufacturing base. They invested $90 million in a 425,000 square foot facility in Fort Worth, Texas, and ended up shutting it down because they couldn't figure out how to make a wrench locally. Yeah. So that's a wrench, one piece of steel.
Forged steel.
Right?
Like this.
Case hardened. It's a case hardened grade steel where you put it in a furnace and let it sit in there in a carbon rich environment that makes the outside of it a little harder than the inside, so you have a nice ductile core, so you get the good resilient wrench. Pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to. I mean, we have products that we case harden at work. It's not an easy thing to do. I understand why they couldn't do it at mass. What I'm trying to say is, to build up these skills is not just a turn of a switch. Oh, we're just going to start making them here. It's a people thing. There's a lot of know-how that is not necessarily well documented. There's a lot of just cultural knowledge of having done something for a certain way for so many years that doesn't get translated into every SWI, every standard work instruction, that when you try to then port that knowledge over somewhere else, it gets lost. And it's a people thing, as you point out.
Yeah. People and the broader supply chain. You got to bring all those things into the factory in order to make that product.
Yeah.
And that
very much
right there is like China's advantage. Even if I was told when, kind of like poking around Vietnam myself, it was like, well, all the stuff is going to go into China, and then from China, it's going to go to Vietnam, and then the Vietnamese factory is going to do it. And that's why it's going to be more expensive for you. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, your supply chain is in China. That's it. It's all right there. And that's part of the speed and low cost.
That sounds frustrating.
We'll see. We'll see where it all shakes out. Maybe we'll, end up with some sort of tariff that, like, is stomachable for, for, I say, the American people broadly, because guess what? Prices are going up.
Mm-hmm.
That is already happening.
Do you have any restrictions on how you can adjust your prices for these on Amazon or any of the
on
outlets?
platform? There are restrictions on a platform. They are not explicit. They are held within the algorithm. They are opaque. You don't know them until you change the price, and then you've lost your buy box, and your product is now toast. You will spend 4 to 18 months trying to get your sales back to where they were.
That's lovely.
But Andy Jassy did come out with a headline saying he fully expects his third-party sellers to be passing on the extra costs. So I don't know if they've edited the algorithm or paused a piece of it for whatever. I kind of doubt that they're going to go surgical like that. But at least the CEO is saying that, yes, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that, like, it's just, the algorithm can't, I hope the algorithm can't punish that many people if everyone raises prices around the same time at about the same rate, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to, my current thinking is like, pick a 2 to 4% number, and you're going to do it every month going forward until the dust settles.
Wow.
Because at this point, it just keeps going up. So
that actually feels slow on what you would need to do it.
But 4 is kind of your peak. Otherwise, you're going to lose your business. You're done. Lights out.
So you, do you have enough? And if we don't want to talk about this on air, we can not. But like
we will see.
So I would think to be able to handle that ramping up 4% a month for a period of time. How many months do you have to run that to get to where you need to? Hold up.
I don't know. I haven't done the math yet.
I'm going to do it right now, because that's not that hard math to do. So you need to get to, 125% tariffs?
On my COGS.
On your COGS? Oh, wow. So that means you need to get shit. So that is how many months? It's, as I said, Dan, I'm going to calculate that for you real quick. That's going to take you about 21 months to actually catch up to those tariffs. So unless you have 21 months of inventory on hand, that means you're going to be taking a hit for several of those months.
That assumes that these tariffs don't settle back down below that number sometime.
Also true.
So I think some of the more sophisticated players, and by sophisticated, I partly mean well-balanced sheet companies, are just like somewhere between eating it and doing price increases like I just talked about. So I'm trying to go like soft and kind and sustained, because it's so opaque and unplannable that all I know is costs are going up. So I might as well not crush myself and my customer all at once. And just maybe this is just like we're readjusting everyone's mind to the fact that every single time they go to buy something, prices have gone up. And you have one man to thank for that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a handful. Him and a few people that have been giving me advice, but
yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
but something along those lines,
but
right?
I think most of the people that are giving me advice are also just people there who he keeps around that says what he wants them to say. So yeah, it's mostly one man.
I think the other thing that I have going on in my head right now is I think these are the kinds of times that make people scared, especially business owners, especially when they're looking at a tariff bill that used to be, I don't know, it depends on the size of the business. Just like let's play with pretend numbers, and it used to be $1 million in tariffs per year, and now it's going to be like $5 million in tariffs per year. That could be more than your entire take home, right? That's like a medium-sized business, right? So then it's like, am I working for free, or should I just fire everyone and shut it down?
Liquidate, get what capital you can out of it.
Yeah, there's some big decisions that come out of this as soon as there's any sort of clarity. So given those sort of like darker outcomes that are completely on the table still, if everyone else is trying to protect their ad spend and like sort of make their net smaller so that they think that they can travel more months under this duress, I'm kind of thinking maybe harden the paint. I'm going to use I'm going to keep my ad spend up and try to like take more market share. It might bankrupt me faster, but it also might put me in a better position.
Well,
I don't think there's any way to know.
As long as you can be bringing on that market share at break even or better, it works, right? So it's just about how, I guess, in your situation, about how quickly you can get prices up, or because your cogs aren't going to be going down at your discretion. So, or at least maybe.
No, they won't.
The opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It won't be at my discretion. It's at someone else's.
Yeah. Okay.
So I always promise to reserve the right to change my thinking, but right now
that's fair. Well, so speaking of changing your thinking, here's one from corporate land this week. I was trying to get a meeting with our center manager, and for some important projects that we have going on. Wasn't able to do so because he got pulled into a meeting on Wednesday for our local basically tariff strategy discussion. Him and our supply chain manager and big group of people got pulled down to one of the offices here in Houston called the area called Sugarland. And they were meeting there all afternoon, and they got about 2 hours through the meeting. And then halfway through, everything changed because Trump just rescinded everything. And so the first 2 hours of their discussion were null and void.
But are they? Are they null and void?
No, but are they? Yeah, no. Yeah, it's like, well, now we have that.
Well, now we have that. Let's write it all down. Because we might have to use it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Whiplash up and down.
It makes it extremely frustrating. We're having a real challenge of thinking about our sourcing strategies. How much do we buy? When do we buy? Why do we buy?
Just put off buying certain things right now?
I think as much as we can. I think as much as we can. Yes. Some of our problem is some of our lead times are. If I want to order stainless steel for the grade that we most commonly use at our facility, I'd say 10 months is a low end on the lead time.
Wow.
For when we were talking the quantities we typically want to order in. We buy some stuff on the spot market. We try to buy what we call mill runs, where we'll actually say this is our planned demand for 12 months or so, and put in through a distributed order that goes to one of several mills across. There's a little bit made in the U.S. A lot of the sizes we need aren't made in the U.S., so we have to go to overseas. So India, China, Italy, Germany. I think there's one up in the Netherlands, I want to say. We work with suppliers, all over the place. Yeah.
Worldwide isn't a euphemism for China in this instance.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's literally like a lot of different mills in a lot of different countries.
Yeah.
When we're trying to plan out our orders for a year and what we're going to be needing, because of the long lead times, we have to be thinking in longer term durations. And also what we are thinking is, what's the oil market look like for the next 12, 18, 24 months? And it's looking pretty choppy. So it's oil and gas service industry, and probably to some degree E&P, exploration production. So those being like Chevron, Exxon, they're doing, they buy the leases to get hire people to do geographical surveys, and they hire somebody like us to come in and do the services of actually drilling the well along with a driller. So everything that we do went way up in terms of cogs because it's a lot of steel. That whole well is built with steel up and down, and that's taking a big, hit on the chin here. So it's and we don't know what oil is going to be doing price wise. So it's making it very difficult to forecast and say, this is what we should be doing, and develop a coherent strategy towards. So there's a lot of uncertainty, which is typically bad for us wanting to go in and invest in, let's try to bring up production here, or
uncertainty is like the worst. Like, you give me bad news, I can plan for bad news, right? If I know the bad news is sticky and real. But if it's bad news today and good news tomorrow and bad news the next day and good news the next, then it's your total deer in headlights. Like, how much can I pause? How much can I lower payroll? Like, the decision matrix starts to get dark pretty quick with the uncertainty. Which is the economy. Stock market's not the economy. No. That's the economy. Payroll's the economy.
Payroll's the economy.
Yeah.
The stock market is a
It's an indicator
barometer.
of the future.
It's a barometer of people's opinions about the economy.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of think about it.
I heard someone, I think it was Derek Thompson. He's like, the correlation is very high. It's not 100%, but it's extremely high. Like if you get a more than 10% drop in the stock market, then there is like a 90+% chance that there is a recession after, because it's a prediction machine.
Exactly. It's a barometer on people's opinions of how things are moving. It's very much mood based, and if people aren't feeling well about the way things are going, they're not saving their money into equities as much, and that hurts their growth and their pricing, or they're pulling money out and saying we're going to pull this out and put it into gold bonds or whatever.
Gold.
Well, not bonds right now, Dan. As you pointed out, the 10-year rate and the 20, 30-year rate are way up, indicating that people are selling. But I think those sellers are mostly governmental actors in larger investment banks that are basically re-rating our credit for the United States effectively and saying, we viewed that the United States has larger credit risk than they have in the past and have decided to hold less of our long-term investments, at least for the price that they were holding them, with the yields that they were getting them for.
Well said.
Yeah. Did you read Citrini's piece about government bond yield histories?
No.
He wrote something for his, paid subscribers. You should check out. It was a pretty interesting piece about the historical accuracy of how government bond moves predict, again, kinetic war. And it was very effective until 1970 or so. And then it's broken down a bit.
Decoupled. Yeah.
Then it decoupled a bit. But it was a really interesting thought piece into how when the rest of the world starts seeing destabilization in a government, they basically say they're not as creditworthy. Their yields change. And then for a long time, within 60, 90 days of that happening, kinetic wars tended to break out up to World War I at least, maybe World War II. So just an interesting little bit of history on the way that these bond yields move are actually kind of important, though it just seems like a number. It's an expression of the world's opinion. And if not that the world's opinion is right, but that if a lot of people are thinking the same thing, there might be something to it. No smoke without fire, as Bolo liked to say.
Where's your quarter?
Yeah, where's your quarter, right?
I'm going to be Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan, man. That's like my destiny.
Yeah. Yeah, because you won't have a job otherwise.
No, it's true. Like, come to the army. I'll be like, I'm going to die over there, aren't I? Anyway.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough doomerism for 1 week.
Yeah, totally.
Any bright spots on any reading anything good? Any bright spots that you want to highlight before we sign off for the week?
My bright spot, I just started. I mean, I read 8 pages of it or something. It's a book called The Maniac, and it's historical fiction, but it's about John von Neumann and how like everyone was like scared of his intelligence and his he was like a polymath, right? Like anything that he touched, he completely upended and changed.
Okay.
So I'm excited to spend time with John von Neumann.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I've been
it's got all the usual players, right? Einstein, Schrodinger, Dirac, like all of them.
What is von Neumann most known for? Anything in particular?
Game theory, quantum, probably a lot of other stuff that I'll learn during the process of reading the book. Yeah.
Very good, very good. I recently started a book called Splendid Exchange, or How Trade Shaped the World. Oh. It's actually free on Audible if you are interested in adding it to your queue. I'm only about 10-20% of the way through. No, 10-15% of the way through. But he's starting off going back into Sumerian times and giving a little too much detail in certain areas about basically how trade really started, like from the accounting of, we can count things now and write down numbers and seal things and put a, you would know that this vessel was from a certain trader because they would put clay on the top and roll their seal over the top of it, and it would dry. And then so when you received it 1,000 miles away, you could say, oh, this is from the right place.
Yeah.
And some of the
verify.
Exactly. Some early technologies that developed, and ultimately it's supposed to get into the modern system, and I'm looking forward to that most of all. But it's been fun to think about very old school trade for a while. First off,
and appreciate how far we've come.
Yeah, exactly, and also understand how much just a part of the way humans are. It is like the trading of goods.
It's like the basis of our it's cooperation. We are like our minds are all connected. And that, it's like going back a few episodes and talking about like an interconnected consciousness is like it manifests in trade. That's one of the ways that like I view it as like,
well, that's what the stock market is trade.
Yeah.
Stock market is a trade of opinions, right?
Yeah.
So
you might think, Tesla's worth $100 and I might think it's worth $200. And therefore it's like, hey, let's come to the table and trade, because then we can express our opinions this way.
Exactly. And one of us will be happy and one of us will be sad. Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I lose and I'm like, I deserve that one. I knew that one wasn't going to go my way.
I didn't talk myself out of it. Damn it.
Yeah. But if you talk yourself out of thing, you'd never talk yourself out of everything. You'd never do anything. So you got to take a stab once in a while.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Well, that's what's on my radar and something I would recommend. But other than that, it's just struggling through the world and going for another week of whiplash. So, well, I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation today. Thanks for tuning in, as always, to another episode of Unqualified Advice. We will catch you again next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you.